Hello, today we are making a video about sorting Hunger Games characters into Hogwarts houses. This may have been done before, I don't know. I was gonna make this video about like a bunch of different literary characters from different universes, but then I started writing about the Hunger Games characters and I had so much to say, and something I've learned about myself is I really don't with editing a video that is over like 30 minutes long. So we're just gonna keep it to the Hunger Games characters today, and if people like this video, I could do a second one with non-Hunger Games characters. Also, I have a pimple patch. Ignore that. So first we're just sort of gonna go over the core words to describe each house so that you and me can be on the same basis for like what I was looking at to make these determinations. Gryffindor is defined with bravery, chivalry, and daring. Slytherin is defined by ambition, cunning, leadership, and resourcefulness. Ravenclaw is defined by intelligence, learning, wisdom, and wit. And lastly, Hufflepuff is defined by hard work, dedication, loyalty, and fairness. So we're just gonna jump on in with Katniss Everdeen, the girl on fire. My initial idea was like, oh, well, she's gonna be Slytherin. Yeah, and I think it's just because her demeanor is so like pessimistic and kind of hateful of other people. And I think also maybe it's just because I resonate with her so deeply as a character and I'm a Slytherin, so I just sort of immediately was like, yeah, she'll go there. But when I was actually looking at the traits, I found that she much more aligned with Gryffindor traits. She's not particularly ambitious. She kind of just wants to keep her family safe and live her happy little life and be left alone. She's not particularly cunning, and she never wants to be put into a position of leadership. She's just sort of forced into it, but she is brave and she is daring. What I will say is she doesn't have much chivalry. Next, Peeta Mellark is a Hufflepuff. I don't need to explain that. I think quite literally everyone in the universe is in agreement. Haymitch Abernathy. So Haymitch I put in Slytherin, and Sunrise on the Reaping just further cements that this is the correct placement for Haymitch. He is incredibly ambitious with his goal to break the machine, aka destroy an entire totalitarian regime at 16 years old. Bro, he is cunning. He knows what people want to hear from them. He plays into it. He knows how to act in order to evoke a certain response from people and in order to get across a certain reputation, not only in his own time as a tribute, but also from what we see in the trilogy as his time as a mentor. He takes immediate leadership positions in the Big Alliance during the 50th Hunger Games, and he also has a leadership position in organizing what I'm gonna call the Golden Alliance in the 75th Hunger Games. And the fact that he survived that fucking arena, that crazy ass arena, without starving, without dying of thirst, without eating something poisonous, without getting attacked by a mutt, like, the man's resourceful. We know that. So yeah, I don't think there's any argument. Haymitch Abernathy is a Slytherin. Speaking of Slytherins, Coriolanus Snow. Moving on. Now, Effie Trinket, this might be a controversial placement, I'm not sure. I'm putting her in Hufflepuff, our first Hufflepuff for the day. Wait, that's not true, Peeta's in Hufflepuff. Ignore me. Effie is such a product of her environment. We meet her as a woman who works incredibly hard at her job. She cares a lot about her job, and because of that, she is very inextricably aligned with the Capitol and the Hunger Games and the propaganda. And while, like, that's not untrue, that's not an untrue statement about Effie, I don't think that's her as a person. I just think that's a result of her environment, simply because she knows nothing else. People in the Capitol literally cannot see district people as human beings because they have been made out to be animals for so long, and the propaganda is so good. So when we start to get to know Effie and she starts to get to know Katniss and Peeta, we see that she is incredibly loyal to these people. She does not truly deep down in her heart view them as monsters. She is incredibly dedicated to her craft and her job and to the people that she is there to serve and help. Even though at first it doesn't come off that way, it just comes off very much like, I'm here to do a job, let me do my job. Ultimately, I do think that core person of who she is comes out, and she can't help loving Katniss and Peeta and becoming a part of that little family that they have with Haymitch. And at the end of the day, she is fair in her own mind. While we don't necessarily agree with her thinking, her perspective, her morals, and we kind of see some of her opinions as almost monstrous because of how dehumanizing it is to district people, again, it's all she knows, and so in her mind, she has a code of fairness that she is following. It's just maybe not what we as readers look at and be like, yeah, she's acting totally fair. She's treating everyone fairly. Her perspective on fair is just so skewed. All that being said, this is one of those that I am completely willing to hear people out on. Maybe not Ravenclaw, but if you want to make a strong argument for Slytherin or Gryffindor, I will hear you out on this one. All right, next we have Tigris Snow, and she is another Hufflepuff. Again, I feel like this is one that most people could probably pretty easily agree on the placement. One of her core traits in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is being an extremely hard worker, to the point where she puts up with like literal abuse and workplace rights violations. She's incredibly dedicated to her family and incredibly loyal to Snow, but she's also very fair. Even when her family, specifically her grandmother, is demeaning and dehumanizing these district kids, she's still sitting there going, they're just kids, look how scared they look how hungry they look, we should treat them with human compassion and give them food and treat them like human beings. She's a very fair person, and ultimately her fairness takes priority over a lot, even her loyalty to Snow. Once it becomes undeniable who Snow is and that he's a fucking monster, she doesn't keep that loyalty just because he's her family. She sees that what he's doing is unfair, and she sees that the fair thing is for him to die. And ultimately, I know some people are like, doesn't that make her maybe not loyal? But no, because that is her loyalty to her morals and what she thinks is fair and right. Ooh, I'm excited about this next one. We have Gale Hawthorne. Ladies and gentlemen, our first hat stall. Now, if you don't know what a hat stall is, if you're not a fucking nerd like me, it is essentially when the sorting hat in the Hogwarts universe takes more than, I think it's like 5 minutes to decide. And I believe the turf said that the two hat stalls from Harry's year were Hermione with Ravenclaw and Gryffindor, and Neville with Gryffindor and Hufflepuff. This is our first hat stall of the year. And this hat stall is between Gryffindor and Slytherin. And by hat stall, I mean Olivia stall. I just sat there and I kept flicking back and forth between the traits, and I was like, oh fuck, I don't know. Oh shit, I don't know. What am I gonna do? So Gale is incredibly brave. If we think about the start of the first book, Katniss is not actually a very rebellious person, both in action and in spirit. She kind of just wants to, as I said earlier, be left alone with her family, and that's really all she wants. Gale, on the other hand, is boldly proclaiming his rebellious nature and his intentions and want to fight back or run away or do something. And I would argue that Gale is one of the people who I do think shows chivalry. There will be a couple other Gryffindors that I'm similarly to Katniss gonna say aren't very chivalrous. Gale is. He saves all those people from District 12. We'll get more into that later. He is one of the few characters that is actually willing to stand up for what is right, despite his environment. And we'll continue to talk about the chivalry thing with Johanna, but let's just leave it at that I do think Gale displays chivalry. And the dude is clearly fucking daring. Like I said, he is openly rebellious and willing to stand up against the Capitol. He's willing to stand up for what he thinks is right. He is daring. And again, the whole thing with saving all the people from 12 and bringing them to the woods, we'll get there. So all of that would say he's a good Gryffindor. However, those are also all points that actually lend him to Slytherin. His rebellious nature and view of a better future could be read as ambition. And I don't see much cunning out of Gale, but like on paper, but I think you have to imagine if he was able to get that high up in Coin's rankings and in the military, there was definitely a level of cunning there. He takes on leadership roles constantly. When his dad died when he was only 13 to 14 years old, he immediately stepped up and became the man of the house and a provider. And again, the people that he saved from District 12 will get there. And also the leadership position he took on in 13 and in the war. And lastly, this man is so incredibly resourceful. Like I said earlier, he started providing for his family. Yeah, at 13 or 14 years old, he's providing for 5 people, including himself. And then, by the time he's 18 and Katniss is sent into the arena, he makes a promise to her that he will also provide for her family. So now he is feeding 7 different people at the age of 18 in Panem. The dude's resourceful. That's not all. Now let's talk about him rescuing the people in the woods. I don't think this gets talked about enough. Gale managed to get so many people out of District 12 and managed to have them all survive in the woods, including children. disabled people, elderly people, people who are not able to fend for themselves in that survival capacity. And I'm not talking 10, 20 people, I'm talking 900 people. Gale saved the lives of 900 people and then managed to keep them alive in the woods. This man is resourceful. Also, just saying, like, guys, can we give him a little bit of credit for that? I know he did a really fucked up thing in the end, but like, can we give him a little credit for that, please? Speaking of that bad thing that Gale did at the end, we have Beetee. He's in Ravenclaw. Next, we have Iris. She's in Ravenclaw. Moving on. Johanna Mason. This, I had a very similar experience to what I had with Katniss. My initial thought was like, obviously, she goes into Slytherin. And then I looked at the traits, and no, she goes into Gryffindor. Similarly to Katniss, I think the way Johanna comes off and the demeanor she has is less of who she truly is at the core, and more of just a reaction to the current environment she exists in. And I said I'd come back to the chivalry thing. Again, I don't think that she has much chivalry, but I don't think the environment allows for much chivalry, which is why I made kind of a big deal about Gale being chivalrous, because I just don't think when you live in a totalitarian regime where you literally can't do anything about it, I don't think there's much room for chivalry. Like, okay, you can open the door for someone, I guess that's considered chivalry, but when we're talking about adhering to a moral code, you can't. You don't get to dictate how things are going to go. You don't get to swoop in and be the hero and change things. That's not how it works. Things are gonna go how Snow wants them to go. So I just think the chivalrous one is just so confusing. Next, we have Plutarch Heavensbee. Now, I feel like if I reread Sunrise on the Reaping, I might put him into Ravenclaw, but I think really where he fits best is Slytherin. He's clearly ambitious, as he wants to take down the entire fucking government. And even back in Sunrise on the Reaping, like at the very start, we can still just see his ambition in his work. And I also don't think it's possible to become a head game maker if you're not ambitious. I feel like similarly to billionaires, that's kind of one of those things where it's like, if you get to that level, you stepped on some people to get there. He's also obviously incredibly cunning with how he manages to play double agent with Coriolanus Snow, but he's also cunning in that he uses people. He uses them to further his own ambitions of taking down the capital, and he deems the consequences that them and their families are going to have to face as worth it, and he just does it. And a lot of people, maybe not a lot, but a couple people in my comments on my review and analysis of, or maybe it was the second video I made, one of the videos that I made about Sunrise on the Reaping, I made a comment that I don't think Plutarch's a very good person, and I think he uses people regardless of the consequences of their family, pretty much essentially what I just said, and a couple people really disagreed with that. I don't necessarily think it's an awful thing. I think, like I said in the other video, it is a means to an end. He does have to sacrifice a couple people in their family in order to ultimately take down the entire government that is harming the entire country.
Like, yeah, people are gonna die. It's just terrible, but like, inevitable?
And again, I just think that's such like a Slytherin thing to see it as, of like, yeah, I'm gonna use you and I'm probably gonna get your entire family and all your loved ones killed, but it's for the good of the people, man, ultimately, you know? I just think that's so Slytherin. And specifically when I'm talking about people that he uses without getting informed consent about what's going to happen to them, I'm talking about Haymitch and Katniss. He's a head game maker, which shows his leadership abilities. He also pretty much organizes this entire rebellion. I mean, he definitely had help, but the implication is that he is ultimately the mastermind behind breaking the machine. And I don't think you can make a plan like that and pull it off if you're not resourceful, especially when your plan relies on a person who doesn't know there is a plan, doesn't know what the plan is, doesn't know they're a part of the plan. Like, you have to be resourceful to make that work. Next up, we have Dr. Gaul. Ladies and gentlemen, our second hat stall. I was so between Slytherin and Ravenclaw, I really could not decide. But I did decide on Ravenclaw, and these are the reasons why. She is ambitious in the face of her science and her research. She is cunning, but it always serves her quest to satiate her curiosities. She's a leader in the realm of academics and science and research, and using those scientific discoveries to further the games. And she's resourceful because of her wisdom and wit. Gaul is one of the most intriguing characters to me in this entire series because she's evil, but not in the same way someone like Snow or Coin is. Snow and Coin are evil because they're narcissistic. They have an insatiable need for power, and they do a lot in that pursuit of power and self-gain. They hurt anyone they can, and they are not afraid to hurt people for that power and self-gain. Gaul just seems to be curious to like a dangerous point. And there's a reason why scientists and researchers have such strict ethical codes and boards of approval and, you know, processes to get published and stuff, and it's because that Dr. Gaul archetype is not fictional. I think there's been many a person who gets so lost in their pursuit of knowledge and answers that they stop thinking about the consequences of their actions. They stop seeing their test subjects as human beings that they're testing, and they stop thinking about whether the findings are going to outweigh the cost. So I don't see her in the same sense that I see Snow and Coin. I see her as someone who's so unempathetic and sociopathic that she doesn't have a line. There is no line for her to draw. If she has something that she wants to know about, that she wants to study, that she's curious about, she will do it. It doesn't matter the cost to her. So she prioritizes intellectual gain and knowledge over everything else, which is incredibly Ravenclaw to do. And also, when I refer to Gaul as a scientist, I think maybe some people will be like, well, she's not just a scientist, she also, you know, is like a game maker. I think she sees the Hunger Games as social science. I think to her, the Hunger Games is kind of like a really fucked up, twisted version of the Milgram experiment. Quick debrief if you don't know the Milgram experiment. Basically, they had people come in and ask them to shock test subjects, and the goal was to see how far a person's willing to go when someone of authority is telling them to do something. And I think she would kind of view the Hunger Games as a similar experiment to that, but further. How far is a person willing to go before they start to accept it? And I mean truly accept it to the point of enjoying it and reveling in it easily. I think she is so curious to see if she can turn all of these people into almost like slaves. Like, can she change these people's moral code to start accepting and celebrating the death and brutal murder of children?
I'm not a slave.
I am. That's why I killed Cato. And he killed Thresh. And Thresh killed Chloe. It just goes around and around.
And I think she's so fucking interesting for it, because like, we do all have these questions. Like, the reason we're reading books like this is because we have these curiosities. The only thing that really separates us from Dr. Gaul is that we do have a line that we are willing to draw. And it happens a long way before we get to like having children murder each other on TV. Alright, good old Sejanus Plinth. I think a lot of people would put him in Hufflepuff, but I'm putting him in Gryffindor. I can see the arguments for Hufflepuff. He's quite loyal to Snow, and some people would say he's loyal to the districts. I don't really agree. I think that's more of a self-serving thing, and he's just being crushed by his own guilt, and so he's doing all these things to make himself feel better, but ultimately it's about himself. It's not about him caring about the people left in the districts. He's certainly dedicated to his cause to the point where it gets him killed, and he definitely has his own code of fairness that he tries to follow. But I just think Gryffindor fits better. He is very brave. He continuously stands up for what he believes in, even in the face of authority, and like serious authority. Like, I to be fair, I don't think he truly understands the gravity of what he's doing, but I don't think that doesn't make him brave. I think he is still brave. He just is also maybe a little reckless. He's chivalrous, both in the sense of having good manners, but also in the sense of adhering to this moral and social code that he truly deeply believes in. And he's daring. He's fucking daring. This dude went into an active Hunger Games arena in an attempt to give Marcus a proper District 2 burial, which that, again, I think goes back to the chivalry thing and respecting this religious, spiritual code. So yeah, that's my arguments for Sejanus in Gryffindor, but if you want to argue he's in Hufflepuff, go for it. Next we have Finnick Odair. Again, maybe a controversial pick, but I'm putting him in Slytherin. Kind of opposite to Katniss, my immediate reaction was like, yeah, Finnick's a Gryffindor, obviously he's a Gryffindor. And then I started looking at the traits, and I didn't think so. I still think he could be a Gryffindor, or maybe even a Hufflepuff, but Slytherin just felt more right than both of those. Finnick's so intriguing to me because of how well he plays this golden boy. I find him to be incredibly cunning. And I think that initial scene where he first meets Katniss is kind of an example of that. I think he is so difficult to read, and as we come to get to know him, that's very much not who he is. He's not being himself with Katniss, but at the same time he kind of is. Like, it's such a confusing scene. He's like, he comes off as a little bit flirty, but we know he's not being flirty, like actually genuinely flirty, because of Annie, and also because he's like an adult and Katniss is 16, and I just don't think Finnick would do that. And so because we know his behavior isn't actually flirting, I can't help but read it as provocative, and I don't mean in the sexual sense. I mean, like, he's literally poking and prodding at Katniss to provoke her and get into her head, and that is such a Slytherin thing to do. And additionally, when you think of the Golden Allyship, Katniss really is not the leader in that, despite being the leader in so many other facets of the trilogy. I personally see Finnick as very much the leader of that Golden Allyship. I find that, you know, he was one of the people that was actually in on it and organizing it with Haymitch. He was the one who was rounding everyone up together and, you know, getting Katniss and Peeta to trust him, getting them together with Mags, getting them together with Johanna, and then Wyrus and Beetee. And Mags, Peeta, Johanna, Beetee, they all seem to look to Finnick for guidance and direction throughout the games. Wyrus didn't, but that's just because Wyrus was so far gone that I don't think direction or guidance was really gonna do much for her. I think she was sort of just following people and going with the flow. Sad. Love you, girl. And lastly, he's very resourceful. Like, obviously, yes, because he's able to survive multiple arenas, but also in the emotional sense, taking secrets and ultimately blackmail, taking secrets as payment for his services is fucking genius. Like, that is a resourceful thing to do. You have so much money, so you decide, you know, what would be more resourceful if I took a different form of payment, a different form of currency that is actually valuable to me. And he did. And then he used that. Like, he's a fucking genius. Lastly, we have Lucy Gray Baird, and I wanted to leave her till the end because she is our final hat stall, and she was the most difficult character for me to nail down. Like, she's literally all of the traits. So what is the hat stall? The hat stall is between Slytherin and Hufflepuff. Why did I ultimately pick those two? Let me take you on a journey through my thought process. So I first ruled out Ravenclaw pretty easily because that was the one house that had a trait that I did not feel like applied to Lucy Gray, and that trait would be learning. While I do think she's a curious girl, I just don't think learning is something that she actively pursues. I think if you asked her her values, learning would be pretty low on the list. I don't think that would be one of her top values, especially compared to the other values that are listed off. Then I ruled out Gryffindor because I felt like she shows bravery and daring pretty much only in the face of adversity. And I know what you're saying. I actually don't. But I'm gonna pretend that what you're saying is, girl, what about the snake and putting it down the mayor's daughter's dress? That seems pretty daring, and she didn't have to do that. But also, why wouldn't she? In her mind, she's pretty much as good as going to the hanging tree. She's not going to survive. Why the fuck wouldn't she? And she also clearly was like, all right, if this motherfucker, if my name gets called, then I know this fucking bitch made that happen. So I'm just gonna do it. Fuck it. So I don't really think that's showing that she's a super daring person. I just sort of think it's like a fuck, I'm gonna die anyways, might as well fuck this girl, you know? And then her bravery and daring in the arena are self-preservation. There so she can survive. Her bravery and daring in the face of snow is self-preservation so she can survive. And of course we aren't even completely sure she is running away from Snow in the end. We don't know what she knows. We don't know her thought process. We only know Snow's thought process, and he thinks she's running away. And so then it was two, Slytherin and Hufflepuff, and I was so conflicted until I realized this is just another example of why the narration in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is so good, because I am so anti-Snow. I am so in the camp of like, this dude is a master manipulator, narcissist, nothing from his perspective is to be believed. And yet here I am buying into his perspective, because I realized if you ask Snow what Hogwarts house Lucy Gray's in, the answer is Slytherin. If you ask anyone else, anyone in the Covey, anyone in District 12, Jessup, anyone else, they would say Hufflepuff. And that just sort of made my decision right there. And then once I realized that and I looked back at the Slytherin traits, I found it was kind of similar to Gryffindor, where it's like, sure, she displays the traits of a Slytherin, but I don't think that is who she is at her core. I think it's a response to the environment she exists in at the moment. Meanwhile, if she was taken out of this environment and put into a much better environment, her dedication, her loyalty, her sense of fairness, and her hard work would all still be core traits and values of hers. And that's that. Please like and subscribe and comment if you could do that. Thank you.